There were some notable athletes of the future and the past at Rathmines Park today for the West Lakes Athletics Club Fun Run. In all, 600 runners with a varying degree of fitness took part in 2 runs, one of 3 kilometres and a longer one of 9.7 k's. Held in conjunction with the Dobell Festival, runners found conditions extremely hot, and in the shorter distance it was John Staples who greeted the judges first. In the girls section it was Catherine Swartz who was the winner, and her performance was rated very highly as she finished 4th overall. In the longer run, the athletes had to contend with hotter temperatures and a hillier course, and it certainly took its toll. It may have been unfair for some, as Jason Maxwell knew the course like his own backyard. Well, to be truthful, it is his backyard, and he strode away to win in an excellent time of 29.06 minutes. First lady to finish some 8 minutes later was Maureen Cummings. At Cessnock it was hot work for dirt bike riders, but they didn't mind the dust and heat as they received the best instruction on their sport from one of Australia's great motocross riders, Stephen Gall.
To teach the guys, both young and old, because we've got guys of 8 years of age here and some of the guys here of, say, 35 years of age, to teach them the better and safer aspects of dirt bike riding. Not only to just go out there and go flat out around the track, but to do it safely, because motorcycling is a little bit dangerous if you treat it the wrong way. But I want these guys to enjoy their motorcycling and to dress in the right protective gear, to ride the bike correctly with the right technique, and just to approach it safely.
Stephen has also been working with an illustrious name or two.
But in the off-season, we worked a lot with Wayne Gardner. Wayne was very, very keen to get into his dirt bike riding because he could see that was an excellent way to train him for the sliding and the movement of the Formula One motorcycles.
Premier Greiner made it quite clear at the last electricity conference that he was unhappy with the County Council's performance. Today, though, he praised what he called the successful rationalisation of the industry.
But organisations like Elcom, like Telecom, do need to make a return on assets. That profit is not a dirty word to organisations of that kind, but the assets belong to the people. And if those assets aren't being properly used, don't produce a proper return, don't have a proper dividend policy, then the people who suffer from the misallocation of resources and the bad management that inevitably follows are all the people who own the organisations.
Since performance contracts between the government and the individual councils were entered into, running costs in the state have fallen by $53 million. But while the government is pushing greater autonomy and flexibility within the industry, the councils believe they're being lumbered with unnecessary restrictions.
We're very mindful of the fact that we are getting more autonomy. Over the last few years we certainly have done that, but then you get these rather contradictory items where it seems to me that it's bureaucracy stepping in and trying to reinforce its will on county councils, and I think that's negative and we should resist it.
During the 3-day conference, each council has the opportunity to air particular concerns. 2 issues sure to be debated concern the government's ideas on profit. As well as proposing that each council pay a dividend from their profit, legislation could soon see councils investing only through the Treasury.
Virtually all county councils, instead of being able to invest their monies as they see fit and as they've done in the past, can be limited to only putting it on deposit with banks or putting it on deposit with the Treasury. Now, we say that's a crazy thing. It's going to cost all the county councils money because the Treasury don't give as good a rates as the banks do.
News of the crash sent waves of shock and fear throughout the Hunter last night. With both trains having begun their journeys in the region, panic reigned for the family and friends of locals who'd been aboard. Newcastle City Rail General Manager John Zantiotis was told of the disaster just minutes after it happened. Within the hour, he was on the crash site, a scene he would later describe as appalling. He spent more than 12 hours there, helping rescuers and sifting through the carnage in a bid to understand those last terrible moments. One question today was why a steam vintage loco like the 3801 was allowed to hold up a busy line like the Newcastle to Sydney route.
A 3801 has travelled many thousands of miles on the state rail system, and only on Saturday did a similar trip, and everything went okay. Yesterday something went wrong.
Also on the scene from Newcastle last night, 6 ambulances, a full team of paramedics and the Westpac rescue helicopter. It brought one man back to the Royal Newcastle Hospital, but after being diagnosed with only severe bruising, the 42-year-old from Sydney was released this afternoon. He'd been a spectator at the night St George clash at the ISC. For Westpac's John Skeens, the sight of the red and white garb of the Dragons supporters amongst the wreckage was particularly eerie.
Many people, or many of the St George people that were on that train, in fact, had walked past here, and one of the comments were, we'd really love a ride down to Sydney in your helicopter. Little to be known that in 2 or 3 hours later that we were in fact ferrying St George supporters back to hospital.
For Charlestown solicitor Michael Hill, news of the crash began a mind-numbing search for his teenage sons, which ended hours later at Barara.
We got into the club and one of my sons just walked past and said, "G'day Dad, what are you doing here?"
What frame of mind were they in, Michael?
They were quite relaxed then. We've spoken to them today and they got the shivers when they got back to school and realised how lucky they had been.
I believe they were extremely lucky.
Yes, they had been in the front of the train, and because it was a smoking carriage, they got out and went down the back of the train and joined their friends.
The painter's mate is the brainchild of Central Coast man Adam Sames. A rigger by trade, he knows the difficulty of painting while hanging from scaffolds. His invention gathered dust in a cupboard for 5 years before he retrieved it for a crack at a $1,000 prize. The device is attached to a paint can and then fitted or clipped to a ladder, giving the painter a free hand. Mr. Sames hopes to manufacture and market the painter's mate for around $20. Today's show stealer was not comic Ross Daniels, but this invention from Singleton rodeo rider Alan Wilson. A small herd of these pint-sized buckaroos has already been produced. Suitable for 2 to 4 year olds, the Hollywood horse is made of foam rubber, has false legs on the outside, pretends to feed on grass, and should sell for around $100. More than 300 entries for the Inventor of the Year competition will be judged by the midday show's Beverley Gledhill for their originality and practicality.
Work began in July last year on a 4-kilometre stretch of expressway for the final link between Swansea and Wahroonga. But in planning the road, engineers struck a hitch. The route ran over the old Wallara coal seam mined during the 1950s, making the area too unstable for major roadworks. Borrowing new technologies from the mining industry, the engineers discovered a way to plug the problem. They found using waste from the power stations, a byproduct of burnt coal called fly ash, mixed with cement, they could fill the old mine shafts, some up to 15 metres below the ground.
That's very novel for us and unique in road building, but it has been necessary to ensure the stability of the road for many years into the future.
By any standards, it's a massive engineering feat. 10,000 tonnes of fill will be used. That's 50 times bigger than any previous operation to block off old mine shafts. The government has spent $1 million on the filler work, adding to the $19 million price tag for the dual carriageway. According to the Road and Traffic Authority, it's money well spent. In the last 5 years, 6 people have been killed and more than 100 injured on this stretch of the old highway. Its winds and bends are horror for motorists in wet weather and peak holiday traffic.
Mr Boyd was guest speaker at the Newcastle Businessmen's Club and spoke broadly about the economic future of the region. He stressed the importance of setting goals in the Hunter, planning the future and not just grasping at major contracts which may or may not come our way. As a key player in the coal industry, he recognised the importance of exports in addressing Australia's appalling foreign debt. Local coal production rose 28.6% in the March quarter, according to figures released by the Hunter Valley Research Foundation. Mr Boyd says that's a result of improved work practices at mines, but while production is up, coal sales in the first half of the year were slow.
At the moment the market is a bit quiet and therefore production is exceeding sales, and we have a bit of a growth in stockpiles. The level of the stockpiles to date is quite healthy and nothing to worry about, but we have to hope that the sales pick up in the second half of this year so that we get a more balanced situation.
Mr Boyd says with inflation running above that of our trading partners, there is a case for a fall in the Australian dollar.
For Australian exports to be competitive and therefore for the balance of payments to be improved, and if the balance of payments improves then hopefully interest rates are lower and all that will help the Australian economy, and for that to happen we need a dollar down around 70 cents.
Singleton's dirty water problem has been worsening steadily since the Glennies Creek Dam began supplying water to the town in 1988. This year the council has received more complaints than ever. A deputation from the Singleton Council met with the Deputy Premier and Minister for Public Works, Wal Murray, to discuss the problem. It was decided that design investigations would begin immediately into the construction of a water filtration plant, with the government putting up an initial $250,000. The design phase should take 9 months, then construction will begin. It will be completed late in 1992. The $4 million plant will be financed jointly by the Council and the Public Works Department. That means Singleton residents will eventually help foot the bill through higher water rates.
In April, the Alderman asked for a report on the effect of staff shortages on non-earthquake related building approvals and inspections. Health and Building Director Harold Stewart last night delivered that report, which included a complete appraisal of the impact of the earthquake on all functions of his department.
Things like routine health surveying work, complaints are just not being done, and of course normal building applications, and those are ones that aren't affected by earthquake damage, are taking a lot longer than normal.
While the Council's program of routine inspections of shops, factories, swimming pools and the like has been halted, Mr Stewart says urgent matters are being attended to promptly. Prior to December the 28th, building approvals were being turned around in 10 to 15 working days, but now 5 weeks is the norm. While this is a worry for the community, efforts are being made to alleviate the problem by employing temporary staff.
Probably within about 3 weeks they will start to be attached to the council. There are a number of health and building surveyors and there will be a number of clerical staff, and I believe within a short period of time we'll be in a position to start getting close to normal again.
The delay has been caused by waiting on state government funding for the extra employees and a chronic shortage of skilled people. This has meant a scheme to second staff from other councils hasn't worked, so recently retired and former council employees are returning to the fold.
Another day in the office for Simon Law. He's forcing himself to surf tiny waves in a bid to crack the surfing world's elite top 16. But while his form is fine, his finances aren't. Dropped by his major sponsor, Law is battling to even pay his way to the events, let alone win them.
I found it hard trying to get a clothing sponsor to sponsor me, so I've come up with my own. But I'd like to get something away from surfing. Maybe if someone in Newcastle could offer me something, it'd be great.
Not content to wait for the world to come calling, Law has decided to take the matter into his own hands. Left without a clothing sponsor, he's now gone into business for himself, manufacturing a range of T-shirts he hopes will sell well enough to keep him on the tour and on track for a climb up the ratings ladder.
Well, it's going to be tough, but hopefully if we get my clothing off the racks and into people's houses, things will be a lot better.
Yeah, obviously you haven't done all that you'd like to do in surfing. It would be a bit of a body blow if you had to drop off the tour at this stage.
Well, I don't want to do that. I still feel that I've haven't reached my best yet, and I hope to do really well this year and years to come.
But the competition this year could be just that bit more demanding. Simon's Newcastle mate Craig McMillan seems destined for a shot at the big time after finishing second in the Open division of the World Amateur titles. McMillan's effort helped the Aussies to a thrilling last gasp win in the team's event. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
The land causing problems for State Rail is this rocky embankment on the western side of the Tickle tunnel. After heavy rain in February, it started to slip down into the valley. That put enormous pressure on the rail track which follows the valley floor. The track buckled, forcing trains to observe a 20 km/h speed limit on that section. Since then, the rail line has been monitored around the clock, with measurements to check for movement made every 2 hours.
The safety of the track is monitored 24 hours a day to ensure that if there is any further deflection of the track, trains will be stopped.
The solution is to fasten the embankment to rock and stabilise the land. 75 anchors, much bigger than this previous attempt, some 56 metres in length, will be drilled into the rock. The project will cost $3 million and take some 40 weeks to complete. Today's announcement by State Rail will be of comfort to nearby residents. None of their homes will be affected by the works program. Train services will also not be affected.
We must maintain the safe, reliable section of track within this area, and we have no other alternatives but to take corrective action immediately.
The aim of Philip House at Carryong was to teach state wards, many of whom were victims of physical and sexual abuse, independent living skills. For many, it was the only security they'd known, and a major step in keeping them off the streets and away from possible crime. But the home closed down 2 weeks ago, leaving youngsters like Chris Meredith, 15, and Emma Withnell, 16, to cope on their own. How are you managing living here on your own?
It's pretty hard because we always have to walk everywhere, catch buses, and we don't have that much money. It's really hard.
Ex-Phillip House staff voluntarily helped them find this flat and are keeping an eye on them and others. But the youngsters say they have not been visited or contacted by Family and Community Services staff, who represent their guardian, Minister Virginia Chadwick.
Have you had any active help from anyone from FACS?
Besides a check, nothing else. Nothing at all.
Regional Director of FACS, Terry Madden, said Chris was seen twice when he was given his money, and he said he believed this was adequate supervision.
Well, I'm not too sure exactly what visits Emma has had, but I can assure you that Emma and Chris and any of the children that are still in our area will be visited by departmental officers on a regular basis and will be offered any support that we can give them.
But it's an ironic situation. Only yesterday it was announced that millions of dollars are to be spent on upgrading security at juvenile detention centres. Yet it's institutions like Phillip House that aim to keep the kids out of high security detention centres and out of our expensive prison system. Rebecca Skinner, NBN News.
The All Black under-17 outfit looks every bit as menacing as its senior version and plays the game of rugby union just as ferociously. They came to Newcastle fresh from a 44 points to 15 shellacking of Queensland, and when they raced to a 14-0 lead by half-time, many thought the country boys were in for a repeat dose. The second stanza was a different ball game though. The locals began to dominate the line-outs and were unlucky not to score on several occasions. The points were split 3-all in the second half, and the countryside earned the respect of the visitors. They ran out winners 17 points to 3 and can expect to face some of today's opponents once again when the national side is picked before the junior test on May the 20th.
It was about 8 o'clock on Saturday night when Lou Hogan went to the Windsor Castle Hotel for a quiet drink. At about 9:30 p.m. he finished his beer and left for home. Lou has arthritis, which gives him a characteristic hobbling walk. He would have looked an easy target to his attackers. He walked about a kilometre along Laws Street, then cut across an unlit park on the corner of Brunswick Street. That's when the hoodlums made their move. Police say the attack on a defenceless 60-year-old man was one of the worst they've seen.
Was it a fairly cowardly attack? Certainly very cowardly. It appears he has been struck from behind and whilst on the ground has been kicked numerous times.
The youths showed no compassion and continued their attack even as they stole Lou's watch, then turned out his pockets to snatch $85 in cash. Police have no doubt that a misplaced kick could easily have killed him. Today, almost a week after the attack, Lou is able to leave his hospital bed, but the bruising, scars and fractures are still shocking evidence of the beating he received. Police have some clues. A witness has told them that he saw two youths on mountain bikes standing over Lou's unconscious body. They may have been the attackers. If not, police want them to come forward and help them in the hunt for the real culprits. The first is 18 to 20 years of age, about 185 centimetres tall, of skinny build. He was wearing a white t-shirt and dark jeans. He was riding a red and white men's push bike similar to a mountain bike. The second man is also 18 to 20 years of age, of similar build and height. He too was riding a men's push bike. Lou's stolen wristwatch is a distinctive one, similar to this illustration, and bearing the same brand name, Pulsar Quartz. If you think you can help police, call them now on the Crime Stoppers number, 008 251 009. There's a reward of up to $1,000 for information leading to an arrest. The number once again is 008 251 009.